Adventure and Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
Wake up, America! It's time for the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY.com, West Palm Beach's #1 internet radio station. Here's your host, the Pipeman.
Trailer trash, fallen angel of the underclass. Teenage drive up with a perfect ass. Yeah, she moved in fast on me. When we first met, she was puffing on a cigarette.
This is Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman W4CY Radio. I'm totally excited about our next guest. We talked a while back, and we're talking again because they just played at Punk in the Park in Orlando, which, what a killer festival that is. I always love that one every year. But I love that it was in Orlando because I could actually drive to that one. Unfortunately, as everybody knows, my listeners, I had to miss that, which I was really bummed about missing this band's set, but they are killer, no pun intended. So let's welcome to the show, Blag from the Dwarves. How are you?
Hey, how you feeling?
I'm doing all right. And so let's just start off. How was Punk in the Park?
Well, always a fun festival to do. This one was out in Orlando, so it's just hotter than hell out there.
Yeah.
And, you got to kind of contend with the super heat while you're playing. But, we had a lot of fun. I mean, I always have a good time in Florida. And we got to do a gig with TSOL in Daytona and a couple other things around the dirty South. So I had fun with it. Oh, we got to see Joe Queer at his place out in near Atlanta, and we recorded a couple of Queer songs. So that was
nice. I'm thinking about what you're saying about Florida because I live in Florida, and I always wonder how bands like you that have a lot of energy even survive through a set in Florida heat. Okay.
It's kind of easier to do a half hour than 45 minutes. I was sort of glad we had the early set thing going because, although maybe it would have cooled down a little bit later. I mean, yeah, you got to kind of figure for the terrain, and yeah, some of these East Coast summer shows can really debilitate you, but you get energy from the crowd and the people being out there and having fun with it. And, you see people singing along and all that. And it just kind of carries you along.
That it reminds me of, Warped Tour, always the last show in August was always in West Palm Beach, which is near where my studio is and where I live. And I always used to be like, that's insane that you're doing the gig in August in West Palm Beach when you're doing something like Warped Tour where you're touring. It should have been something like is more in the beginning of the tour,
Well, I never did Warped Tour. We never got invited to that particular set of reindeer games. They kind of kept out of that. And so from what I hear, it was not really designed for the comfort or pleasure of bands or crowd.
No.
It was basically about making the maximum amount of money for a bunch of guys with shoes or something. So
I love that you brought
talk about it.
I love that you brought that up because I was just talking to somebody this weekend when I was at Riot Fest about that. And it was like the first year it was a real punk thing. And the rest of it never was.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, it's, punk rock doesn't really replicate to me in any setting except for a little shitty club in the middle of the night. That to me is punk rock. Like,
yes.
Going to a festival and paying a shitload of money and buying a big t-shirt. I don't know, like I have fun doing that shit now because it's just easier for me and my band, and I can be seen by more people, and you can move more merch and get a bigger paycheck. I mean, it's great in a lot of ways, but it's just like none of it has felt like rock and roll to me ever.
Well,
to me, rock and roll happens in nightclubs in the middle of the night.
It's so funny you should say that. Two things on that note is I remember in LA, I moved to LA in 1980. I was 13 years old, and the first club show I went to in LA, I was like, I'm never going to a real concert ever again. And that started me like for years, just every Friday and Saturday night going to club shows. To me, that is the best way to do a show for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that just feels right to me, but I guess it's just kind of where you're from and what you grew up doing.
Yeah.
But for me, standing with a shitload of people and trying to have a big mass group experience is not really my idea of music,
It's got to be intimate,
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the most fun I had with music too as a kid was a new record would come out, you'd go to your friend's house and everybody would listen to it,
Yeah.
And like, it's so rare now that I ever have an experience of listening to music with anybody,
Right?
It's just not really done. People watch TV, music is sort of for your earbuds or for the background or for while you're doing the dishes or while you're falling asleep or whatever, it's for me, the way I grew up, we really loved music, and a new record was a really big deal, and everybody didn't have it. And, you'd go to their house and listen, and you'd put it on, you'd hear it on the big speakers, and it would sort of mean something to a group of people, and the kind of experiences people have now with music, I think, are very private, and, they're not, it's not that same kind of social thing. And so I think it translates to like the big shows, the silliness, it doesn't come from the same kind of intimate thing that I grew up with music,
Well, yeah, because like what I grew up with, same as you, it's like, first of all, you went and bought an album. You didn't know what it sounded like unless you went to their live show first, but otherwise it just looked cool. And it was an experience. Like you said, you'd get together with your friends. You would play the album over and over again, look at all the artwork, look at all the stuff, and like just totally get into it. Or I would go to club shows in LA, and then you would go with the band afterwards to either somebody's house or the Rainbow or someplace or whatever, and just party all night long. And everybody's like, there's more circle pitting after the show sometimes than during the show.
Well, yeah, I mean, that whole world of festivals and buses and shit is very back-assward to me, too. It's like, oh, so you drive all night so that you can wake up in a parking lot at 10 a.m.? That sounds really fun. Love it. Oh, great, your bus driver got a good night's sleep. I don't give a fuck. The whole thing of that is just mindless to me. It's like, how about after the show, we relax and somebody has a party and we listen to some records and we have a conversation, how would that be? It's like, no, everything fits into a commercial realm. It's like, this is the period when people are drinking and we feed them alcohol, and this is the period afterward when you're not commercially viable anymore. So just be sleeping on a bus that's rolling, you're not, you don't really come into contact with a scene per se. Like some of the early experiences I had in rock and roll, I would like, going to Seattle for the first time and seeing how they were doing it there, and going to LA and seeing how they were doing it there, and going to New York City and seeing how they were doing it there, and then kind of hanging out and feeling what the town was like. Those are the kind of experiences that are very rare now, because everything's kind of been set up for maximum profit, and also for all these bands that are very scared of any interaction with their fans. I mean, I see it all the time at these festivals. It's like, we hide on the bus, and then we hide in the backstage, then we go out and say hi to the crowd, and then we go and we hide. We're hiding on the bus. We're scared. I don't know what to do, and you're just like,
I know, right?
Fuck, man. Like, why did you get into rock and roll in the first place? So you can
No
be scared
doubt.
and hide on your bus and talk to your tour manager and have your cheerleaders fucking carry your roadie cases around. It just, none of it really makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. And you talk about the scene, and it is a scene. And like just recently, I was watching, I call it like a home movie to me because I experienced it, but the documentary about the OC punk scene with the Cuckoo Nest. You know, it's like you mentioned TSOL before, they were part of that, and the Dead Kennedys. And, you know, it was like, it was a whole scene, and that club was like iconic, and the whole, you know, that's really to me where American punk should have stayed, you know. And like I remember being a kid, it's like if it played on the radio, it sucks.
Yeah, well, I mean, new things come and take things place. I think hip hop music really took the place in terms of immediacy of punk rock, you know, and then it sort of blew up. It was more commercially viable in terms of the beat and the kind of background quality to it. You could just put it on without the vocal, and it was very soothing for people. And then it kind of, you know, and so I think a lot of the kind of celebrity thing of rock and roll leached away to hip hop. And, you know, rock and roll was also kind of a victim of, you know, how shitty the records were that people were making. You know, like if you sit there and make a shitty record every 13 months, because that's your recording cycle. I mean, I just sat through a lot of really bad punk rock records where it's just like, really, this is your fucking record? Like, the people don't feel hungry, and they don't feel like they really give a fuck, and the rest of the people in the band don't really feel like they're trying. A lot of times it's like one guy that writes everything and kind of has the idea. I see that a lot with punk bands. And, you know, with my band, it was always more, I had good guys playing with me, and people that were interesting and would write a song, and something new would come up, and you go, oh, we could try this, you know. I think with a lot of bands, they just kind of do what they always did. There's gold in the middle of the road. You do what you do, you know.
Yeah. See, like I love, like a few years back, I went to this tiki bar in Stewart, Florida, like somewhere nobody really goes, you know, and I went there to go see GBH at a tiki bar. And I'm like, that's the most fun, you know. And I was interviewing Colin, and I'm like, so what, like, you know, being here in Florida? He goes, well, one night you're playing to 1 million people in Mesopotamia, and next night you're at a tiki bar in Stewart, Florida.
Yeah, GBH was always good. I always thought they did a good job at kind of still being a rock and roll band.
Yeah.
A lot of English guys don't seem to have that. They've got kind of oi, oi, oi quality. And it's like, where is the rock and roll here? Like, is anything fun, or is it just like, oh, Margaret Thatcher, you know, and you're just like, motherfucker, you know. GBH always felt to me a little more like a rock and roll band, you know.
There you go. I love it. So we did Punk in the Park. What else is coming down the pike for you guys that we want people to know about? Well,
we're heading out to Australia. So
wow, that's cool.
Fans out in Australia, come see us. We're playing with Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, starting October 30th through November 13th, I think. And, you know, of course, they're great. I mean, it's just such a funny, great band, such a creative idea. You know, they're basically, I mean, the idea is just doing kind of punk rock covers of classic pop songs, but the way they execute it is always so funny and interesting. You know, I just have a great time with that band.
I love it. That is going to be a lot of fun. And in Australia, have you guys played Australia in the past?
Yeah, I mean, this will probably be, I think, the 5th or 6th time we've gone there, but it's been a while. You know, the pandemic kind of slipped everything down. You know, you a lot of places that we used to get to a lot, you just kind of aren't getting to. And, you know, yeah, it's this will be fun to go back to Australia. And it always kind of reminds me of earlier America, when
really
was a little friendlier and a little, I don't know. I always liked Australia.
Oh, that's cool. And what's the scene like in Australia, or at least from the last time you were there?
I think the Melbourne kind of always had sort of the strongest underground, you know, sort of dwarves friendly thing. But, you know, we could always get good stuff going in Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane. You know, it's I don't know. It's been a while, so we'll see how it goes. You know, I'm thinking the combo of us with Me First is going to be a fun combination. You get a little more hardcore at the beginning and a little more kind of fun frolic stuff at the end. And it's, I think it'll make for a fun show.
And I agree with you. Their concept is great because I remember back in the day, I always thought some of the coolest punk rock songs were covers, where they just took a song like you're talking about, a pop song or something you would never expect to be punk and turn it into punk. And I dig it.
Yeah, it works, when you do it right. And Spike has such a great sense of humor and such a strong voice, and Spike sang on some of those early kind of pop punk Dwarves classics, like Everybody's Girl and One Time Only and You Gotta Burn and stuff like that. So I've just known Spike for a very long time. And, I just think he's a great, great singer. Always has been.
There you go. And so tell everybody how they can reach out to you guys, check out the tour dates, buy your merch, because that's so important nowadays. And anything else you want them to know.
Rich. Well, we came out with a couple records just in the last year. You can go to thedwarves.com, and of course that's got all the merch and records, shirts, all that bullshit. And you can check out our video channel, a lot of funny videos and stuff like that. But if you just go to thedwarves.com, last year we made a record called the Dwarves Concept Album, came out last November. And that was a very kind of sprawling, big kind of white album kind of thing with 20 songs on it and a lot of different genres, hit a lot of styles, everything from garage to hardcore to pop punk to noise, to retro kind of stuff. And then we had an EP or like a mini LP that came out this year called Keep It Real, the Dwarves Keep It Real. And that was cool. It kind of filled in some of the cracks from that record. And so that was sort of our whole COVID era, 30 songs on 2 records. There was a lot of stuff. And I'm working on another Ralph Champagne record. I make solo records under the name Ralph Champagne, which is a little more, retro, country, lounge, rockabilly, whatever kind of a feel to it. So I'm working on that now and working with a female vocalist, Petra Hayden, who's very talented. And we do a lot of weird, she's just such a great, she sort of elevates what they call background singing to like a featured performance. She's just so good with like harmonies and things. I find like, songs where I think you need a piano or you need some instrument to fill it out, you just use her voice. Nice. And she's so complete, So it's interesting. I can kind of sing these songs and get my lyrical slant across. And then her way of approaching harmony singing is so interesting that it really kind of elevates it, So, these last few years have kind of been like an interesting, almost kind of renaissance for me musically. I've been recording a lot and doing a lot of cool shit, and then of course the industry just collapses more and more, and there's fewer and fewer places to play or to sell stuff or to do whatever. But I just keep kind of looking around and going, yeah, but this is a cool song. This is a cool record. I'm just going to do this. I sort of gotten to the point where I don't know what else to do. I just do it.
So how do they check out your solo stuff?
It's a Blag Dahlia record. And it's called Introducing Ralph Champagne. I think the new record, maybe I'll just do Ralph Champagne and have that character take over completely. He's more like a low rent Hugh Hefner kind of guy, But yeah, you can find it all at thedwarves.com. I under the merch section, you just go to the LPs and you can find it there. And I think a lot of people who like different kinds of genres and not just punk will really get a big kick out of that record. It's people hear it and it's a real 180 from the Dwarves and from what I usually do. So
nice.
You can find those records. All the Dwarves records are back in print. Over the last few years, I got everything in print, and so demand it at your record store or just go to thedwarves.com and buy it up, but it's out there. You can get the Dwarves catalog and you can get my solo stuff. And there's some interesting stuff in there. I think a lot of punk bands kind of gave up on making interesting records, and we never did, and I always had great players with me, guys like Nick Oliveri and Josh Freeze, and just different guys from different groups that were able to write cool songs and do cool shit. So we really kept it interesting. And, you know, then we got the new generation with like Snoop Hawk. He's a young drummer guy, but he's also the singer for a thrash band from Tucson called Get a Grip, you know. And so different people coming into the group and keeping it interesting, you know.
I love it. And, you know, it's funny what you mentioned about, you know, with making new music and the fact that you have made 2 albums in the past year, and yet a friend of mine, Joe from the Vandals, who I've interviewed several times, he said to me once, he knew I wouldn't ask this, but he had to do it in the interview because everybody else asked him. He goes, and don't ask me when the Vandals are coming out with a new album and new music, because who wants to hear a 50-some-odd-year-old dude writing punk rock?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. I mean,
right?
Joe's an old friend of mine, and he's you know, he's an attorney and has all these far-flung interests, everything from broadcasting to bullfighting, you know. Right. So there's all kinds of reasons why he's not interested in making a record or whatever, and I get it. They just want to go and headline a fest and make some money and come home. Yeah. You know, for me, I still get a kick out of, for me, the most fun part is when you write a song, or you get with your friends and you write a song and nobody's heard it yet. You know, it's like, wow, this is cool. And then the next cool part is when you actually produce it and you hear that song and it comes to fruition. I think a lot of punk bands haven't gotten that feeling in a long time, you know, so they, and, you know, to be fair to people, you know, some people grow up and they, you know, they want their family or their job or something else takes over. They're very interested in cat rescue or bringing malaria tents to Rwanda, you know, and God bless them, you know. For me, it's like I still get a kick out of making a great record, and I still find it to be a challenge and an interesting thing to do. And it was kind of one thing when we were like young and relevant and people talked about it, and it was like, oh, this is part of Nirvana. No, this is part of Green Day and whatever it was. You know, now I've just sort of let all of that go. I just make records. I don't know why I do it.
Because you're a true artist.
I don't really care about the psychology or philosophy behind it. I let the music speak for itself. And I think just like when I was a kid and I discovered very obscure bands like the 13th Floor Elevators and the Chocolate Watch Band and just, you know, the Phantom and, you know, Hazel Adkins and all these people, every day somebody discovers something that I did and they go, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, how come nobody knows this? How come nobody's buying this? How come I never can see this band? You know, and it's like, you know, because that's kind of the underground nature of life and of what I do. You know, it's the music scene that me and my friends came up in, you know.
I do love it. And like I said, makes you a true musician and true artist, in my opinion, because to me, that's the reason to be in music, is to have fun, to enjoy it, to be creative. All the other stuff, you might as well be a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm not interested.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you guys rock. And I can't wait to see you again. And man, it was great that you were at Punk in the Park. And man,
thanks to Cameron for throwing us on there. And yeah, man.
And man, have a blast in Australia too. Have a blast.
Will do, Pipeman. Thank you for talking to me.
Anytime, and thank you for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
You got it, buddy. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.